Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Linda McDonald and I'm one of the members at St John's here. I'll just move that away a wee bit. And this morning I want to look at some of the themes that emerge from the very familiar story of Martha and Mary that we find in Luke's Gospel. So I'm just going to read the story from Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, and indeed only one. Martha has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." This is a story that most of us know very well. Martha is bustling around, trying to do everything that she feels is important, while Mary sits quietly listening at Jesus' feet. But I don't think this story is one about one sister being right and the other being wrong. I think it's a story about balance. How do we find time to do the things that we know we need to do and still find time to sit with Jesus? So this morning, I want to share with you some thoughts about how we could maybe build some balance into our lives. I wonder if anyone's following Pete Gregg's Lectio 365 series on Lent. If so, you'll be hearing daily about how the desert fathers and mothers lived, setting themselves apart and seeking God. Pretty much all monastic traditions grew out of how they organised their lives. And I'll be drawing on ideas from the way early monastic communities organised themselves. Now, most of them live by what they call a rule of life, which follows a set plan for their days. And while that might sound very rigid and unyielding, I prefer to think of it as perhaps a rhythm or a way of life. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all suddenly become monks. That would just be weird. But rather that we look at what we can learn from these early Christian communities. And the truth is that we all already have a rhythm of life, even if we're unaware of it. We tend to have fixed patterns, the order that we do things when we get up in the morning, our routines around meal times, and how we plan our days. So we might want to ask ourselves, what is the rhythm of my life? And how can we create a rhythm that suits our lifestyle and which might help us to find balance between our work, our rest and leisure times, and our life with God? And yes, we all know that all of our life is with God. He's made his home in us and is always present. But we're not always aware of his presence. We're not always tuned in to hearing his voice. And sometimes we just get so busy with life that we forget to make time for God. So creating a way of life for ourselves is about being intentional and choosing to plan our days so that we make time for God and for how he wants us to live our lives. Rather than allowing ourselves to be shaped by hurry or expectations, instead, can we make time to notice where God is at work in our lives already, to be aware of where he's placed us and of the people he's put around us? Because the rhythm of our lives shapes everything that we do. So how do we know what's a good rhythm? Many of us find ourselves way too busy, and sometimes it's difficult to say no to the things that are good too. So that's why we need balance in our lives. I think Martha wanted to be hospitable and welcoming to Jesus, but she was so busy making tea and sandwiches that she forgot to give him her time and attention. And Jesus gently reminds her of this by saying that in that moment, Mary has chosen the better thing. Now, we know that Jesus is our greatest teacher, but we do get distracted and we forget. And in the learning stream over the last few weeks, we've been grappling with some complex and difficult questions. And the thing that I've heard folks say several times is, what would Jesus do? And it reminded us of this trend a few years ago to wear these "What would Jesus do" bracelets. So I bought them for our team. Now, it's a bit twee maybe, but it's not a bad thing to remind ourselves throughout the day to return our focus to Jesus. And when we look at Jesus' life, there was a distinct rhythm or pace to his life. It's gentle. He takes his time. He doesn't ride from village to village on a horse or a donkey. He walks. Walking gives him time to see, to notice, to listen, to engage with the people that he meets. And there are many stories in the New Testament that tell us that Jesus stops when he's interrupted. There's the story of Zacchaeus up the tree, the woman with the issue of blood, a centurion with a sick servant, and lepers, to name but a few. Jesus notices those that others might pass by. And despite the clamour of the crowds that follow him, he also frequently takes time out to spend with his Father in prayer. Reading the Gospels, I never get the sense that Jesus is in a hurry. He makes time for people, and perhaps especially those who don't feel worthy or entitled to his attention. And I think we all long for deeper connections with God and with each other, for places where we are known, where we matter, where we'd be missed if we weren't there. And yet many of us live at a very fast pace, trying to fit so many things into our days. Our lives are shaped by schedules, by efficiency, by notifications on our devices. Lives that move quickly from one thing to the next, barely leaving us time to draw breath. And I wonder if part of our hunger for connection, our need for belonging, is also a longing for a different rhythm. A rhythm that allows us time to connect with God and with each other. So I think there are some things that we can learn from the early monastic communities. One thing was evident in their lives, and that was commitment. Being present to a place, to a people, to the ordinary rhythms of life. Perhaps resisting the urge to move on, to keep scrolling, to upgrade. And instead, to consider where God has placed us, whether that's a geographical place, a job, or a season in our lives. Could we ask, what is God inviting me to at this time, in this place? And it's not about being stuck in one place forever. It's about choosing to be present long enough to make connections, to become community, and to allow ourselves to belong, even when everything isn't perfect. Because we can't create community without commitment. Communities grow through faithfulness over time. There's a couple of stories that I've come across recently which caught my attention. Just before Christmas, I was intrigued by a story from the Llangollen Canal near Whitchurch in Shropshire. In the early hours of the morning on the 22nd of December, when everyone was asleep, a canal embankment breached, creating a massive hole which drained the canal. It washed two narrow boats down into the deep chasm and left a third boat teetering on the edge of the hole. Now, these narrow boats weren't holiday lets. They were people's homes, with families living aboard them at the time. Thankfully, no one was injured. but it caused huge disruption to livelihoods and to homes and to people's plans. And yet, alongside the damage, something else emerged. People showed up: neighbours, volunteers, boaters, engineers. People shared their skills and their time. Money was raised, and lots of love and practical help was offered. Not because it was convenient, but because there was a need. And for a few moments, ordinary life slowed down, and commitment and community became visible. And it was almost as if the breaking of the canal revealed something that had been there all along: our capacity as humans to care for one another when we make space for it. And I find myself wondering, do we sometimes need things to break before we remember how to care and how to belong? Following this story made me curious to find out a bit more about what it's like to live aboard a narrowboat. And what I discovered is this: that life on the water moves slowly by design. Canals have a speed limit of 4 miles an hour. You can't rush a set of locks. You have to wait. You have to cooperate. You can't speed past people unnoticed. You have to speak to one another. And at 4 miles an hour, you see faces. You notice who's struggling, and you offer to help. The slowness of pace in this lifestyle is a choice. It's attentiveness. And it creates the conditions where community can grow. It's not a program, it's a way of life. Now, not long after that canal story broke, a friend sent me an article which had a title that stayed with me. It was called "Everyone Wants a Village, but Nobody Wants to be a Villager." I'll say that again. Everyone wants a village, but nobody wants to be a villager. The article was really interesting, and the essence of it was that we all want the benefits of community, but we don't always want to accept the responsibilities that make community possible. Because being a villager means being interrupted, being known, being needed, and showing up when it maybe costs us something. Our modern lives have trained us to protect our time and to manage our interactions with others. But real connection asks something else of us. It asks us to slow down enough to notice one another, to listen to God's prompting, and to risk inconvenience. Another thread that I found in monastic practices is that of hospitality. And by hospitality, I don't mean entertaining. I mean making room for people. Making room in our lives, giving our time and our attention. And as I've been reflecting on this topic, it's made me wonder how we reached a place where even a cup of coffee with a good friend requires an appointment. We all need to feel heard, understood, and believe we're valued. But it's yet another consequence of our streamlined, fast-paced life that in an age which boasts more ways to connect with each other than ever before, we seem to be losing touch. We've lost many of the experiences that we might call touching places. Places where we might have bumped into our neighbours or friends at local shops, we now drive to anonymous big supermarkets. We hardly see our neighbours as we rush out of our houses and into our cars, and our kids play online instead of in the street. I think living with an awareness of our need of hospitality offers us a slower pace. It helps us to make room for unexpected interruptions and acknowledges that, yes, it can sometimes be inconvenient. But if we want to build community, inconvenience is sometimes necessary. And hospitality is one of the ways that we can live our lives at the pace of Jesus' love. And when I think of Mary and Martha, I think they were both trying to show hospitality. Martha is distracted. We don't know exactly what she was doing, but I imagine she was doing the equivalent of plumping up cushions, shoving stray dirty socks out of sight, preparing food and keeping the drinks topped up. Mary was giving her full attention to Jesus. And when you're a guest in someone's home, what is it that you value most? Obviously, I appreciate a cup of tea and a biscuit. But what I really value is the conversation, the connection. When someone gifts their attention to me, and when I know that they are interested in getting to know me, when they take time to be present. And this pattern, this rhythm, is a recurring theme in the New Testament. In Acts 2:42, speaking about the early Christian community, we read, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer." Those words, devoted, fellowship, breaking of bread, these words don't describe a rushed life. They describe a shared life. And I think that perhaps the rhythm of life that Jesus models is slower than we might expect. Slow enough for us to notice God, to notice his creation, to notice one another. So maybe the invitation to us today is to simply ask, Lord, what is your rhythm for my life? Where do I need to slow down and make room for you and for others? And so this morning, rather than rushing on from these thoughts, we're going to practice them in the way that we share communion together and in taking a few moments to sit quietly together. I'm going to invite Joyce to lead us in communion.